our campaign. Chelsea, go ahead.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. Let me just first make sure my sound is okay. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
And is my video okay? You can tell I'm in a tropical rainforest. Just kidding. It is 20 degrees in New York City today, which is where I live. My name is Chelsea Watson. I use she, her pronouns. As I just mentioned, I live in New York, which is the land of the Lenape people. And I am a distributed organizer. I've been a distributed organizer with the Sierra Club for since 2018. And before that, I worked in communications with the North Carolina team of Sierra Club. And I'm going to present to you all. This is a very interactive workshop. I know there are many of us here today, but don't worry. I've got lots of ways for it to still be interactive, even on Zoom and even with, I see 54 participants. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Do you want me to share mine? Actually, I mean, I have two computers on, so you can see other people.
It's okay. I have two screens and I take notes like as if it's a whiteboard. So it'll work out this way. So you all be able to see me taking notes live during our session. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. If anyone wants to put their video on, like I'd love to just see, like interact with you all. I know you've been on calls all day and I'm a new face for you. So you don't have to keep it on, but just like a wave. Hi, like you're out there. Amazing. Perfect. And you can turn it off whenever you want, but just for me to see who's here. I'm entering the room. Incredible. Oh my God, I feel the energy. Thank you so much. What a gift of your faces. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let me go ahead and start screen sharing. And I'm also gonna have a video at some point. So I'll make sure my sound is shared. Let me do this one more time. Screen share with sound. Okay. All right, you all see my screen?
Yes.
And there's a colorful slide, great. So distributed organizing. The goals of today's session is we are going to talk about distributed organizing. Surprise, surprise. We will talk about applying the Hermes principles to distributed organizing, and then we'll do some application of distributed organizing strategy, this framework of this type of organizing to your work. I already introduced myself. You see me here. Here's another picture from a few years ago, pre-pandemic. And in addition to what I've already shared, I think another story to share with you all was that when I first applied to be a distributed organizer, I was like, I don't know if I know what that is. What is that word, distributed organizing? As I learned more about it, I realized that I actually had already been doing distributed organizing. I just didn't know the term. I started my climate organizing work with the divestment movement. I know Bill McKibben was talking earlier today, so he's definitely a legend in my world, as a campus fossil fuel divestment organizer. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was an example of distributed organizing where folks like myself were organizing independent campaigns on our campuses in different areas. And we had total autonomy to make strategy based on our local conditions. And we were organizing towards a shared goal as part of a bigger network that was the divestment movement across the country and across the globe. So I'm going to ask you all a little bit about your experiences with distributed organizing. And at first, I imagine many of you will think, what is this word? I don't know this. And as you tap into your own experiences, you'll realize you've probably done a little bit of this yourself already. So in the chat, I love an active chat. I know that it might be controversial, but I love it. Give me the chats. Tell me, have you heard the term distributed organizing before? And you can just put a yes or a no. And if you have, or even if you haven't, what do you think it is? All Awesome. Yes, no, and I know this isn't a poll, so I won't be able to see an exact percentage, but it's just great for me to see it this way. Some folks saying, yes, I recognize your names from other presentations and work we've done together, so that makes me happy. And yeah, a lot of no's, which is very okay and super normal. Yeah, Carol, you are right on. Yeah, oh, I like this one. Ooh, yeah, Bill, distributed warehouses from Amazon. I've actually had some folks make interesting connections between like this word distribution and exactly what you're saying. Yeah, Kathy, you know that's real. Well, I'm not sure if you meant the word tormenting, but also if you did, sometimes that is what it feels like. Because sometimes people use distributed organizing just to mobilize, and that's real. And okay, you didn't mean tormenting, but sometimes that is people's experience of it. And just like any organizing, it can feel good or it can feel bad. So if that's how it felt to you, that'd be okay too. Fomenting though, I love it. No, but the biggest obstacle is everybody's shortage of time. Yes, and that's something that this hopes to address as well. Okay, thank you for all of this. So you've already shared a bunch of different definitions, and I'm going to share a definition that I like to use. And I'm going to ask for some help reading this aloud. So if you would be, I need 3 volunteers. If you'd be willing to read one section aloud, would you do the raise hand icon? And there'll be a lot of opportunities to participate. We'll get the first 3 volunteers. Just do the raise hand icon if you know how to do that. I think that's here. Awesome. Carol's our first one and 2 other people. Nancy, one last brave soul. All right, we'll start with you 2, and then I'll wait for one more person. Carol, would you mind reading aloud the first paragraph or the first sentence in this definition? And are you able to unmute? Great.
Distributed organizing activates a network of self-starting supporters, campaigners in multiple locations, which can spread across geographical boundaries, interests, and culture groups.
Thank you.
It draws on the initiative and energy of volunteer organizers to start groups and lead teams with varying degrees of autonomy. Should I go on?
Yeah, go for it.
When done properly, it can help a movement or campaign scale rapidly and channel huge amounts of collective power.
Thank you both. And Carol and Nancy, I'm going to give you a chance first, but others in the chat, I'm just curious, what are some words or themes that stuck out for you maybe in that definition?
Well, the second paragraph really jumped out. So drawing on the initiative and energy of volunteer organizers to start groups.
Mm-hmm. Drawing on, and I'm going to be taking notes here for us too. So I'll be going back and forth. Drawing on, and what made that stick out for you?
Just that an individual can do so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one person can start the group, but be part of something so much larger.
Yeah.
And I was involved with the Indivisible, and that seems like a model that really used this.
Exactly. Thank you. And Nancy, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, there was a reference to scale. I think it was the last line, which scale rapidly. I mean, we use that off and on. It probably builds on what Carol said about the power of an individual, but also being to ramp up an action and have a more widespread both more widespread involvement and ultimately impact. So scalability to me is significant.
Exactly. Yeah. Something scale, ability to ramp up in action and have wider impact. I also want to pull out, I'm seeing a lot of resonance in the chat from autonomy and self-starting. So some folks in the chat, oh, and Nathan, I also see you wrote spread, initiative, scale. So similar to what Nancy was saying. I'm also seeing self-starting, autonomy. It's like a phone tree of organizing. I love that. Ability to quickly and effectively delegate tasks and responsibilities in a local group. Ooh, very interesting. Less or no micromanaging, self-starting, rapidly, across geographical boundaries. Yes, exactly. And Sandra, you said the phone tree of organizing. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in coming off mute and sharing a little bit more about that.
Sure. It's like it starts in one place and you tell a couple of more people about it. And then those people tell more people. And then those people spread it out and tell more people or organize more people. That's how I envision it, I guess.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm also going to put in here across geographical boundaries. Great. Is there anything like words here that are kind of like, what does that mean? Like, what is that supposed to be talking about? Is there anything where it's like, this doesn't really make sense. This is just a word salad in the definition. And if not, that's great too. I see folks looking, reading. Yeah. A network of self-starting supporters, campaigners. It draws on initiative and energy, and it can help a movement scale rapidly and channel huge amounts of collective power. I want to add that one in there. Collective power is a really critical part of it. Okay. Collective, what's that? Oh, good question. Anyone want to take a shot at answering that one? If not, we'll come back to it because that's, I think we all have many definitions, but we can just say people power, mass people acting together right now. So one, yeah, take people where they are, it motivates them. So one thing I really liked that made me think of, or I started making connections in the phone tree example, it starts to spread in one place and it's spreading and spreading, it's multiplying. And how do you make sure that something is multiplying is still a part of the same core movement, core purpose as where it starts, right? Maybe you can imagine something multiplying, but by the end of it, you don't recognize it. It has a completely different purpose, act, culture. So how do you keep something to have the same core organizing purpose, mission, and vision while it spreads rapidly? And one way that we can talk about that is through a term, movement DNA. And this, I've learned about this through a group called Momentum, but also Marshall Gans, who is like an organizing scholar, leader in many different ways, has, I believe, also worked with this term. So movement DNA. So now picture something spreading rapidly, but the DNA stays the same. The DNA is at the core of every new growth. And the DNA is the story, the strategy, and the structure. So if you've experienced distributed organizing, like Carol, you mentioned with Indivisible, I guarantee there was a consistent story, strategy, and structure throughout, even though the groups might look very different from town to town. I can share an example. So I talked about my earliest experience with divestment organizing. We had a story, which was that the fossil fuel industry is uniquely culpable for climate change. We had a strategy, which was that by having our institutions that are mission-driven divest their resources from the fossil fuel industry, we will be cutting the legitimacy of the fossil fuel industry and changing the culture and mindset of this country. So it was very much like a moral strategy. Also with resources, but the fossil fuel industry has a lot. So the strategy was more strongly focused on the moral divestment as well. And then a structure. So the structure was that for the campus divestment movement, a campus student could start a group and they'd be a leader and they'd organize folks, and that was the structure. There was also a network largely supported by Bill McKibben's group 350.org, and as well as this divestment student network that would provide training and other resources when students asked for it. So that was the structure. So even though divestment spread all over and there was nobody controlling every single group, the group still had a common mission, vision, and shared purpose because they kept the initial story, strategy, and structure, the initial DNA. I'm going to be going through a couple of key themes about distributed organizing, so feel free to keep putting stuff in the chat, and I might not get to every question, but I love the discussion, and I think you all can respond to each other as well. So another key component of distributed organizing is that there are a lot of people across geographies acting autonomously in their community towards a shared objective. So we've talked about this already, often as hubs within a broader network. For example, you might think about Sierra Club's former Ready for 100 campaign. These were, and maybe some of you were a part of that, these were hubs of people across many different geographies across the country working towards 100% commitments in their city or town or county. While they were an autonomous group with their own strategy, they were a hub within a broader network. So the key thing here is a shared objective. This actually hasn't come up yet, and I wonder if it's because in pandemic era, we're so comfortable with online to offline organizing or just online organizing in general. But one of the things that distributed organizing really brought to play, for example, with some of the presidential campaigns, so distributed organizing as a major tactic and strategy for the Bernie Sanders campaign, both runs, there's a major focus on online to offline organizing. And so this means a big question for folks who are doing distributed organizing is how do we move people who are on our email list, in our social media following, folks who are engaging with us online, into offline action, coming to a community event, hosting their own community event. Now I think this is just like the water we swim in, the air we breathe, like we just think of this as normal, but this is also a key part of distributed organizing, which might look different from like door-to-door canvassing, right? That's a different strategy. Another key component of distributed organizing is distributing power and resources. It should never be one person responsible for making all of the decisions or one person with all of the resources. So when we talk about scaling up and having all this broad power across geographies, it's part of distributed organizing believes that it's not possible for you to hold all of the strategy, decision-making resources in one place. You need to be comfortable allowing other hubs, other groups to be autonomous. And I noticed that this was a part that resonated with a lot of you too in the chat. So I'm excited to talk more about that. So yeah, and I have a graphic that will kind of describe this in a minute. How does this fit into our broader theories for social change? So some people are like, but what does distributed organizing really have to do? Is it just like the shiny fancy thing? But it's just as important as organized. Distributed organizing is organizing. It's just the way we go about it. And I wonder if I could have 2 volunteers again to help me read these 2 sentences. And if you could just raise your hand, some 2 new volunteers. Awesome. Kathleen, we'll start with you. If you want to go ahead and read it.
Why do we organize? We organize because we believe that when people unite and act strategically together, we can win real victories and shift the power at play.
And you want to just continue and read the whole thing?
Sure. Distributed organizing can allow us to grow our fights, our campaigns, our movement to meet the scale of crises we face, while empowering supporters to take on leadership.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
And I'm just seeing in the chat as well a few comments. Is there room for the DNA to change slightly? I love that. And I actually think that's a pretty hot question. I think folks might have different opinions. There's one idea of a disciplined movement that contains the same story, the same branding. If you see it in one city, it looks very similar in the other city. And there might be another group of folks who say exactly what you say. Can it change? Can it grow into something better if it changes? So I think that is an interesting question. And amazing, Yvonne. I've noticed how local environmental justice organizations have employed distributed organizing to achieve amazing success. And Kathy says, like postcards to voters, getting out to vote all over the country and moving the effort to where it's needed. Yeah, and an example with the postcard effort. So the tactic there, right, is having people send postcards to voters. If you wanted to scale it or make and use distributed organizing to scale that, you might not just say, hey, write a postcard to voters. You might say, can you host a postcard writing party and invite 5 of your friends, and can you all write postcards to voters? So that's where you're empowering now this person who's already an activist, already writing postcards, to not just be the activist writing the postcard, but to be the leader who is hosting their own event, organizing people in their community, and then scaling up the efforts. Awesome. So yeah, please keep comments coming in the chat. I think it's really helpful. So exactly, Yvonne. Yes. So I want to bring in the Jemez principles here. And I wonder if you've seen this before, put a plus in the chat. Have you seen the Jemez principles? Awesome. I love this. Incredible. So these principles are not new to many of you. And also some of you saw them today. Beautiful. So I bring these principles in, and we're going to talk about this because just like any type of organizing, there's a way that we can do this that will advance equity and justice. And there are also ways that you can do organizing that could be more transactional or even cause harm. And so just as any type of organizing, we are going to be talking about these principles for how we can center our work in equity and justice. So awesome. Thank you, Yvonne. So we have be inclusive, emphasis on bottom-up organizing, let people speak for themselves, work together in solidarity and mutuality, build just relationships among ourselves, and a commitment to self-transformation. And one idea, for example, is that we can find a way that these principles help center distributed organizing is even with the question of scale. Scale on its own does not center equity and justice. A movement saying, let's get as big as possible, as fast as possible, might be erasing a lot of voices, might be centering the people who can do something the fastest, centering the people who are the loudest. But if we think about scale while also centering these principles, then we can grow while also emphasizing bottom-up organizing and letting people speak for themselves. And so something we're going to talk about when we go into breakout groups is how can we, in what ways do you think distributed organizing might help you better align with these principles, or what principles do you think are most relevant to distributed organizing to talk about? So we'll come back to this, but just to start thinking about it. So now that we've talked a little bit about distributed organizing, the majority of you said, I'd never heard of this before. Now that we talked about it, please put in the chat if you think now you may have seen an example of distributed organizing. Awesome. We have Sunrise Movement, definitely. Women's March. Yeah, the Women's March is really interesting too, because it started as just a march in one place, which wouldn't necessarily be distributed organizing. And then it expanded to having marches all over the country, which then did become a form of distributed organizing. The Bank Day of Action, yeah, Ready for 100, letter writing campaigns, fundraising by independent churches. Yeah, it's in all different movements. Every town for gun violence, or I don't think that's actually every town, not for gun violence. Seat of the Pants organizing, people, phone banking. Yeah, and a lot of organizing that we've done, it might not start distributed. For example, phone banking is something that can be, it could be you making phone calls. And then the distributed organizing version would be you're hosting your own phone call, inviting people in your life to also make calls. And so that's where you can sort of see the scaling happen with even traditional tactics. Earth Day. Yes. Awesome. Keep it coming. And this is just an important reminder that a lot of us already know this type of organizing. And what we're here today is just to kind of tap into also what we've already known and what we've experienced and how we can learn from that and apply it to our future organizing. So I'm going to show a video here of the climate strikes, because those were some pretty big distributed organizing events. And it's just, I want you all to think about just the scale and the beauty and the diversity of this, not just Day of Action, but multiple strikes. Can you hear it? Was the sound okay? Yeah. All right, so I'm just curious again in the chat, if you want, if folks could put any reflections watching that video, like what popped out at you, what's something exciting from that video, and maybe something that you'd want to emulate in your organizing. Yeah, diversity in the groups. Hoyen, do you want to say more to that?
It's just really cool to see different generations of people there. And earlier this morning, Bill McKibben said the grandparents and the grandchildren have a closer relationship than the parents and the children. So it actually, I never thought about it. And I think it's quite innovative to get the two generations together to do this stuff. And little kids really care. So that's great to get the grandparents involved.
I love that. I love that. And that wasn't necessarily something that was decided beforehand. It wasn't like, for the climate strikes, we will do this event and there must be grandparents and young people. But that's something, when you give autonomy and independence to folks, all of these creative ideas come up even organically too. And that's who showed up. Dana, you said the energy of all those people coming together. Do you want to say more about that?
It's just the idea that when you have that many people working together for a cause, it's energy that can last quite a long time, and it just gives you strength to be able to carry on and believe that other people, feel like you do and are willing to make strides to make a difference.
Yeah, awesome, right? Like there's so much energy. People are like so excited and out in the streets, and just the scale, right? It was like 650,000 people out on the streets or something like that. And just like the numbers were really inspiring. And yeah, Daryl, I think you have a really good point. And I see you've got off mute if you want to share out loud too.
I think it kind of speaks for itself, but I'm kind of in the contingent that feels we need to be more specific about our asks, and just generally demanding climate action. It makes it way too easy for decision makers to just sort of wave their hands and do nothing. I mean, we need specific actions. I come from a transportation orientation, and here in California, half of our greenhouse gas emissions are related to the transportation sector. That means we have to do specific things to reduce transportation emissions rapidly. And it's not just saying we want climate action,
Yes. Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, and I'm going to share that you've just named, I think, probably the key tension in being able to hold so many people under one movement while also making specific asks, because you are exactly right. If there is a climate strike and the only thing that people were talking about was a specific greenhouse gas policy, that would have huge influence on that one specific policy, right? But then on the other hand, you're probably not going to get 650,000 people in the streets just for that one policy. And so you've named the key tension that I think what we saw, for example, with the Sunrise Movement Actions for a Green New Deal, that was massive distributed action, and there was a specific resolution, and each time there was an action, it was geared at members of Congress to sign onto the resolution. So when you're able to match the scale with the specific ask, you're absolutely right. That is like the sweet spot. That is power. And we've seen with things like People's Climate March and climate strikes, sometimes the asks are very broad. So there were asks for the climate strike, but there were about 10 asks. And so that didn't fit into a video, right? And so there were about 10 policy asks that were also delivered to Congress, but that wasn't shiny in a video. And so that's always the tension that we face in these moments. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's like the key tension we have to figure out when we do this type of organizing.
Thank you for the detailed response.
Yeah, of course. All right, I'm going to share another image that I think is helpful, which is this. And so this is sort of about the scale. And I'm sorry, I feel like my screen just got a little funky. Okay, so sometimes when we see videos like this, we're like, but how in the world were there I think there was 350 strikes. I already forget the number. It was 350 strikes or something on that one day. So how in the world, can any of you imagine planning 350 strikes in one day? No, right? How many people do you think would it take to plan it? A lot. And do any of us feel like we have that team ready to plan 350 strikes with 650,000 people? Yeah, I see Bill shaking his head. He's like, we're like, wait a second, how the heck does that happen? And one of the reasons why that feels impossible is because we're maybe thinking about organizing like this. And this is a pretty simple graphic. But let's say I want to plan a day of action for transportation. And I'm like, you know what? We need 6 actions that are going to be focused at departments of transportation. And I will be the lead organizer and I will be making sure they all happen. So that's one person with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 actions tied to one person. I feel stressed just thinking about it. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of responsibility. How many permits are you going to have to get? How many team meetings are you facilitating? That's a lot of work. What distributed organizing does instead is that you have organizers and they work with leaders who are responsible for planning their own action. So I might be this person here, and I'm working with this person, if we stick with the Department of Transportation focused action, and this person is getting the permit. This person is facilitating all of the weekly meetings. This person is the leader, and I'm supporting those leaders. And Dana, I'm thinking about you and our coaching, and this is what coaching is as well. And this is exactly the phone tree model. Instead of thinking, I am the organizer, so I will plan all of these actions, it requires us distributing the resources, the support, but also some of the decision-making and some of the power. Because now that I'm here, I don't get to make every single decision for this action because they are responsible for deciding it themselves. And so then you move from this role of being the center of everything to being more of a support and a network connector. And this can be really hard, but this is what you have to, if you want to grow, this is how you have to give up some of that control and some of that authority. And that's where the movement DNA comes in really handy, because you want to make sure that these folks here, even though they're planning their own actions, right, they're still keeping to a shared purpose, a shared ask, a shared culture, and staying within the terms that you've all set for the movement. So yeah, does this make sense? And yeah, Yvonne, it is delegating responsibility, exactly. And it can seem so simple, but then sometimes they're like, wait, but it's not happening, but we're not doing that. And so sometimes it's a really simple change, but it can make a really big difference. So why do we do it? Big problems need big organizing. We need everyone to be able to be a leader in their community. We also need to be united and work together. And we need to grow to a scale that is big enough to match the scale of the crisis. And I believe, because I'm here presenting to you today, that distributed organizing allows us to meet these needs. Awesome. So we are going to go into breakout rooms in a second, but Yvonne, I think I saw you had your hand up. Did you want to share something? I know you put it down now.
Oh, no, that's okay. I have forgotten it since then.
Okay, well, if it comes back to you, feel free to share. All right. So we're going to move into breakout rooms, and I think we're a little ahead of time. So we might be able to do a little bit if anyone has questions they want to ask before we go into breakout rooms. But first, let me just share what we'll be doing in the breakout rooms. So we'll be doing groups, I think Nathan mentioned about 4 to 5 people. And the questions I have for you all are, do you see any of these concepts of distributed organizing already present in the California Sierra Club? What new strategies or concepts from this presentation would you want to apply to your work? And pick one of the 6 Hermes principles to start with and share how it can apply to distributed organizing. In your group, I'm going to ask that somebody takes notes and that you type directly in the slide. So you'll get this here. And when you see what group number you are, you got to kind of like catch it when you're going into the group, into the breakout room. Find the slide that corresponds with your group. If you can't find it, it's fine. Just pick a random slide and we'll figure it out. And take notes here, so that way we can all look through it together. So you'll take notes here on the slide in your group. Just one person in the group has to do this. So if you're like, I'm not going to open up this slide deck and I'm not going to take notes, that's fine. Just make sure somebody else in your group is taking notes. I'm going to share this.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Chelsea, could you drop the link to the slides in the meeting chat? Okay.
Absolutely. So here are the slides. And again, just one person in the group needs to do it. Any questions about breakout rooms?
Yeah, how
Oh, and
long
you'll
do
be
you want
there
this
for-
to be for?
We are on the same page. Every question you ask, I'm like, oh, I'm about to answer that question. 15 minutes.
All right.
All right, any questions on breakout rooms? Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
So will this chat be, will this link be available to people in chats in breakout rooms?
Yes, it should. I believe the chat will all stay, like you'll still have it, even when you go to the breakout rooms. But to be safe, open it now, so that way you have it. Okay, are we ready?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, 15 minutes, and we'll give you a 5 and a 2-minute warning.
Okie doke. See you all later.
Well, last round, Chelsea, last round, I went to a breakout room and then I realized that my teammates were still in the room with the speaker. So I was like, oops, this time my teammates are gone. But hold on a second, we got the two persons that are not going to the breakout rooms.
All right, I'm gonna set the timer and grab some water, Hui, and
All right.
I'll be right back. Hey, Igor, we are in breakout rooms. Were you in
Hello.
one or do you need to get put into one?
You can put me in whatever I can be on for like 20 minutes.
We've got about, let's see, we got about 7 minutes left in the breakout rooms. Oh, you left. Hello? Hey, Steve.
Hello.
We are in breakout rooms. Were you in one already, or would you like to be assigned to one? You can also just hang out here. Oh, Hey, welcome back. Welcome back, Nathan.
Darn it, I clicked the unmute or clicked the go back when I meant just continue in the meetings, so.
I've done that before. I know I was gonna see if I could give you one more time, but I couldn't figure it out. How was that? I'm sure not enough time. All right, I think a few folks are still
No,
coming
it was
back.
fine. You gave us our DNA and we went out and did it all independently.
Hey, exactly. The structure was the breakout room. The story was the question, and the strategy was that you all had to rotate who was talking and take notes. There you go. Brilliant, Ron. Yvonne, I hear you. I know. I was like, oh, I wonder if I can add a few more, but we do have a lot of time to discuss as a big group, which is not always as easy, but I think we'll be able to have some good conversation. Are there instructions as to anything we need to upload the slide with our notes? Andy, were you able to put your notes in the slide?
Yes.
Great. I think then you've got it. I think that's all you need then. All right, so now we're going to take a second and I invite you to look through the slides on your own, and I'll also share my screen and go through some of the slides so we can read what other people talked about in their group. And as we're doing that, we will pull out some common questions, themes that you're seeing. So sort of like a gallery walk to browse, and you can do it on your own, and I'll also do it while sharing my screen. All right, so we'll take about a few minutes. Maybe we'll see how long it takes to go through it. Maybe 5, just to read what other people wrote.
Well, Chelsea, I don't know how to go to any other group besides the one you're sharing.
I'll do it for you. Yeah, exactly. So I was just gonna like do a few, like 30 seconds on each slide so we can skim them together. Or if you go to the link in the chat, you can just click through it yourself. Awesome. All right. So you can go ahead and start. If you have any reflections you want to maybe share with the group, let's start by putting them in the chat. Great. And I also noticed that a lot of folks ran out of time for the last question on the Jimenez principle. So we can also talk about that. If there's stuff that you wanted to add, we can talk about it here together too. But let's see, where should we start? I see some stuff coming in the chat, a few notes. Yeah, great. Awesome. So Nathan, some topics, actually, Nathan, do you want to say this aloud?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just saw something about in one of the slides about the how transportation is hard, and is curious how people like inform themselves on the issue. And even though I'm on the transportation committee with Steve and Daryl, I gotta say I don't really sometimes feel like I understand everything either. And so it's sort of like, how do we give people the tools, the language, the vocabulary to be effective advocates on priorities like that, and how to sort of distribute the knowledge and talking points that way.
Yeah, thank you. Yvonne, go ahead.
I was in breakout group number 8, and just want to give a little more explanation about the Angeles chapter. I'm the chair of the Angeles chapter's Environmental Social Justice Committee, and we are a very small committee at this time. We just began in 2018. And I was basically thrown into the role with no training whatsoever. We did some amazing work that first year anyway. Then we started 2019, and I had a health emergency in the very beginning of 2019. I had 2 health emergencies. So after that, everything started to slow down. And when I barely started to recover, we went into COVID. So what we've been doing is just surviving through COVID right now. I do have Charming Evelyn, who's the chair of the State Water Committee, as my vice chair for the EJ committee, and she has been tremendously helpful and a very useful resource for me. Plus, she does distributed organizing very, very well.
Awesome.
So what we're trying to do right now is, because we have such a small membership, we don't really have enough membership to do distributed organizing. So I'm focusing on training because so many people do not understand, or they've never heard what environmental justice is. So I'm trying to train people on what that is and how to do it, how to apply the Jimenez principles correctly, and what are microaggressions, et cetera, and trying to keep the group cohesive. We have had projects that we have worked on also, so it's not like we're just always talking. But I just was able to convince another person in our group to come on as a vice chair in training, because that was something that seemed a little bit more palatable to her. You know, she felt a little not sure of herself. And so that's what I would like to do right now, is just encourage my small group of people to start thinking about leadership and start thinking about taking on responsibilities, because we need a hub before we can start going out and actually doing distributive organizing work. And right now, I'm still the one person doing most of the work, and I just cannot do it. And
yeah,
Charming and I both know this because we both had health emergencies recently, and with both of us down, there's like nobody to take over. So that's what we're trying to do, is build that internal structure so that we can actually start expanding out. So people don't have to rely on me to tell them what to do or how to do things. or
Yeah.
just to take the initiative and get things done.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And I'm so sorry about your health emergency. I'm glad you are here with us today, and I hope you are healing swiftly.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is a lot I think that it would be really good to talk about in what you said. And so I'm going to pull out a few notes from what you said and also what Nathan said. I'll start with what Nathan said. I'll move us to the top. So if y'all can see, I'm taking some notes here. I'm a visual learner, so I try to write stuff down and so you all can see it as well. So talking about technical issues is hard. And also for some people, I'm going to be frank, it can feel a little boring. How many of you have been in a meeting where you're really trying to follow the technical issue and your eyes just glaze over and you are like, oh man, I have to stay focused. Now think about how are you going to get 100 people who have really busy lives to also stay focused, to also feel connected and attached. It's a really hard thing. One thing I think that I'd like to bring into the picture with distributed organizing is when it's working well, part of the strength is you have a broader umbrella message or narrative. So for example, I saw a lot of you talked about 30 by 30. So that's about protecting our lands, right? So 30% of lands protected by 2030. So that's a really broad goal. That's a really broad mission. And I think a lot of people are like, cool, yeah, that sounds great. That's a value I have, protecting our lands. And also there's a clear goal, a percentage by this year. If you have that across a state or across the country, that might be your overarching umbrella purpose, your shared objectives, but there's plenty of room to get really specific in your local area. So let's say what I've been using some of my old divestment experience, and I can also bring in some Sierra Club stories too. So in my divestment organizing, the broad thing, the reason why I got involved was like the fossil fuel industry is uniquely culpable for climate change and they need to be held to account. What my day-to-day looked like was super detailed about the board of directors at my university, when they met, what were the different committees. It was like really, really detailed because that's how you make a strategy. As you all know, you need to know who are the decision makers, where are the different places we have to intervene. But we were still able to bring a lot of people in because we were part of this broader message of divest. And then as folks come in and we're getting into the strategy, you can say, and that's why you should really care about this board of directors history with the fossil fuel industry because it's a part of this broader movement. Or for you all, it might be, this is why this public hearing at this state agency is so critical because it's a part of a broader movement. So I know, Daryl, you brought it up earlier and we've been talking about this tension. And I think that that tension can also be a solution because you can then say, I know, why do we care about this transit policy? It feels so small. But if you're part of a broader network and a broader movement, then it's very easy to make that connection. And so folks can say, oh, okay, so we are we are cutting emissions from vehicles in this country by this year. And that is the big goal. And the way I can do that in my community is this very specific thing, but it feels important because it's part of a larger movement. With all of those strikes, if we had seen just one strike, it doesn't feel that powerful, but when you see 350 climate strikes, it feels very powerful. And the same can be true for any Sierra Club fight, whether it's lands, water, transportation. If it's a part of a broader objective moving towards a shared goal, that is like the sweet spot of where you're able to bring a lot of people in under this broad umbrella, but you can still focus on your local strategy. So I don't have an answer for how to do it, but I think Transit Equity Day, for example, is sort of one model that we just saw where there's a day of action around transit equity, and the actual strategy might be very specific or look different in every city, but there's a broader narrative of transit equity. So that's maybe one thing to think about when we think, how do we get folks, how do we do this with technical issues? It's that you're building a movement that the technical issue is helping push forward. And that's sort of a way to do it. So that's I'm curious your thoughts there, Nathan and others. But I also wanted to talk about what Yvonne was saying. First of all, the need for training and support. So you don't go from this model to this model without giving any support to these people, right? So now that it's not like, yeah, I hear that. You don't just say, oh, all I have to do is assign somebody a task and then it's gonna go great. And now suddenly we've scaled up. Absolutely not. And Yvonne kind of brought that up, where it's like, okay, I'm taking on this leadership role, but oh my God, I don't know how to do this. In distributed organizing, it's critical to be focusing on how you're training the people that you say are going to be new leaders and how you're supporting them long term. The way I've done it at Sierra Club, so one type of distributed organizing I've done, and I saw this in the slides, is around lobbying in district during the August and spring recesses. So for example, in 2019, we did a big national push for growing the Green New Deal. And I was a big part of organizing that, where we had folks lobbying in their congressional district on pieces of policy that we felt furthered the vision for a Green New Deal. And it was actually kind of wonky policy. It was the drive electric policy and the clean economy policy that were in Congress that August. And the way we ended up getting 100 lobby visits across the country on these two bills. Whereas before I had been when we've been doing strategies like this, we maybe got 5 different lobby visits, but we used a distributed approach and we got 100. The way people felt supported was through training and coaching. And so we have people sign up to host a lobby meeting in their district. And then my role as the distributed organizer was to make sure they had someone they could ask questions to. That's our coaching team, which Dana is on. We had trainings to make sure folks had a lot of room to feel like they knew exactly what they were getting into, where they could learn from their peers, and other resources. It could be, toolkits, documents, team calls, lots of different ways. So when you start going into distributed organizing, you end up moving from, instead of being the main player on the basketball court, you end up being kind of the coach or the supporter, helping others to take the lead. And that's still a full-time organizing workload. That's a lot of work. But instead of focusing on, I'm planning this event, I'm doing everything, you're saying, how can I support these people who are hosting these events? How can I make sure they have everything they need? So that's just another thing I wanted to underline from that. I also heard the question of how do you do this with a small membership and an issue of too much depending on 1 or 2 key people. I wonder if anyone here has thoughts on those questions. Like how does distributed organizing relate to the issue of feeling like you have a small membership? Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Thank you. I actually always think quantity is different from quality. So a small membership is not really, it's not such an issue. And you can have just a few people who are very effective, or you can have 200 people and most of them are, just not that active. So I actually also wanted to ask the next question, issue of too much depending on 1 or 2 key people. And earlier I took notes is that you said there are, that's not the word you said, but that's probably my wishful thinking, is there are tricks we can practice or search to figure out the threshold between doing too much. Control is not the right word, but and then the other thing is, if I don't do this much, and would it be done? So one person end up doing most of the work, and the whole time you're thinking, well, I would like to really unload this, but I don't know if I unload it, if this is going to be done. Oh, I'm just going to suck it up. I'm just going to do it.
Yes.
So I'm really seeking for advice, tips on that, how to find that threshold. Thank you.
Awesome, Hoyen. Thank you so much. And Pat, I see your hand, but I first want to call in Joanne because I think you also are answering the question there. And then Pat, I'll come to you. So Joanne, do you mind saying that aloud? What's there? Isn't that the beauty of distributed organizing?
Well, when you have a small group, doesn't it work better when you can spread the load to other groups as opposed to just your own group of people? You might be a leader for your group and you can identify tasks for them, but then that can spread to other groups so that the workload is spread between more groups.
Right, like the small group could sort of be the core for the strategy, like what we're saying, the story, strategy, and the structure. And the focus of that small group is to spread it to more people. So let's say you have this inactive list of 200 folks, and the small core group can say, all right, what do we want happening? Like, what's our strategy here? Okay, we want at least 50 phone banks or 50 house parties or 50 community events, 50 lobby visits, whatever number, whatever tactic it is. So that core group of people can say, we're going to focus on supporting those 50 people to do the action instead of us trying to do 5 actions, just us, and have to do every single thing. We can get 50 new folks to come in, raise their hand, and maybe it starts small. Maybe it's just them and one other person dropping off a piece of paper at their local elected official's place, but that's still growing in scale. So that's a really great point, Joanne. And I think that distributed organizing is actually a great tactic if you have a small dedicated group of people. A lot of mobilizations that I work on, I'm like the only full-time organizer, and I just have working with incredible volunteer leaders and other people who can give a little bit of their time. And then we're just focused on supporting new people to come in and take on new leadership. That's sort of the focus, is to come in and take on new leadership. And a key part of that is people feel like they have autonomy to make it their own. So another distributed mobilization I led recently was for last Earth Day for Build Back Better. We had distributed art parties where people could have an art party where they make art and then take pictures or bring it to their member of Congress to advocate for them to pass Build Back Better. We got so much interest because people felt they could make it their own. They could invite their people. They were able to, just be creative and take on new leadership. And then we supported them through trainings, through coaching, through we did phone calls, texting, all that good stuff. And even if their art party was just them and their kid, they were able to take pictures, send it to their senator, send it to their member of Congress, and then come onto a call with people across the country who also did the same thing. So that's just another example of how even if you're a small group of people, if you want to start trying out distributed strategies, it actually could be a really helpful way to get more folks involved. And Pat, I know you had your hand raised.
I think you brought up the things I was going to say really well, Chelsea.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Well, if you have anything else you want to share, you're welcome to too. Cool. All right. I see Carol. Organizing in a small rural conservative community has its own challenges. Yeah, great. Thank you, Carol. So small membership is an issue. Yeah. And I would say a lot of folks that I find really like tap into the power of distributed organizing are people who it's not really possible to get 100 people to an action in their community, but if they're part of a broader network, then they can tap into that power of distributed organizing, even if there's just 5 of them in their small community, which is maybe a lot for that place. The problem with volunteers Yeah, I mean, internet and digital access is a really good question. And there's others who have spent a lot of time figuring out how do you do distributed organizing without access to internet or Microsoft Word or something. We could talk about that too, especially as it relates to Hermes principles. But I'm just,
Chelsea, can I raise a concern?
yeah, please.
So our group actually talked about the strictures kind of in the rules of doing things in the Sierra Club being a barrier. I've done a lot of work for the last 12 years with 350 groups around the state of California. And there's just a huge amount of flexibility and initiative that people can take and kind of do whatever they want.
Yes.
And there really are, sometimes I'll think, well, who should I do this as? Should I do it as 350 or another group that I'm part of? Because it's less in, red tape. So I'm on the federal organizing committee. I kind of know what I can do and what I can't do, meeting with Congress people. And yeah, you have to go through your chapter, you have to go through your state, staff. So there are definitely concerns there, especially if you get into more substantive issues, art, like simple things like writing, phone calling or writing postcards or art parties are great in getting people to turn out. But I just wonder what you think about the give and take there.
Yes, thank you so much, Kathy, for bringing that up. And I want to write that down. Issue. Yes. Oh my goodness. I relate to that so much. Sometimes I'm like, how are we supposed to do distributed organizing here if we have to fill out all these forms and go through these 5 levels of approval, right? It's a challenge. And part of it is because Sierra Club wasn't set up to be a distributed organizing organization, whereas 350 was from the beginning. 350 was like, this is our model, this is our belief. And so we will prioritize flexibility and distributed power over other things. So I don't really have a great answer there, because sometimes it might be better to do the distributed action with another group. However, I will say, I think even with the obstacles that we face, there's still plenty of ways we can bring in distributed organizing. And as a national staffer who is a distributed organizer, I see so much of the problem is some of us, including me and my team at Sierra Club, being okay with letting go of some control and being okay with distributing some more decision-making, distributing power and distributing resources. Some of that is like official, like maybe it's bylaws or it's kind of the technical laws of the organization. And some of it is cultural. Some of the obstacles we face around distributing power and decision-making and resources, it's like the rule and it's kind of hard to get around and it's going to take a lot of work to change that. And some of it is just cultural. And so that's maybe where we are, people who are in leadership might not feel comfortable distributing resources or distributing power because it's not how it's been done before. And that's where the Hermes principles and self-transformation might come in, where we're saying we all have a commitment to transform how we are, to allow people to speak for themselves, to allow for bottom-up organizing. So that would be my tip there, is to figure out where it's cultural and where it's structural. And the structural stuff, I've been in some long fights to distribute some more resources to people, including like our digital tools and different things like that. But the stuff that's cultural is maybe the first part to access. How can we feel comfortable with having more deep democracy and decisions being made closer to the people actually doing the work? I realize I'm almost done, so I want to see, I have a few things here. Chris asked, is there training on how you coach specific techniques? Yes, Chris, we have a coaching team. Dana is on it. I have a very great training. If you're interested, I would love to connect with you. I'm sure Dana would like to connect with you too. I can make sure you all have my email. I won't be able to give that training now because there's 1 minute left, but we do, coaching is a specific technique for sure. Yes, Yvonne, exactly. Dana asked, does the Sierra Club have conferences where there are workshop speakers who can educate others? Kind of like this. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I feel like a lot of it happens ad hoc. So I'm gonna wrap now. I'm at the end of this presentation. I know we could really talk about this for much longer, but I just want to emphasize some of the three main points. If you could take away anything from this and how to bring this into your work. Distributed organizing asks us to distribute power and resources, be okay with other people making decisions that will work for them in their local context, be creative with online tools. We didn't talk about this a lot today, but you all already shared different things like phone banks and letter writing, where we do use a mix of Zoom and in-person activities to do our organizing. There's also a lot more we could talk about as far as using social media to get people active, texting, you know, there's a lot more we could talk about here that we didn't really get to today. Add up campaigns, exactly. And then autonomy with a shared objective. All of you resonated so much in the beginning with like, whoa, autonomy, because that's what we want. Who here wants to join a campaign that's like, thank you for coming. You do not get to make any decisions and I will tell you what to do. And I'm so glad you're volunteering your time to do work for me and what I think is right. Most of us probably wouldn't want to keep doing stuff if we walked into that meeting. However, if we walked into a meeting and someone said, we are doing this project and here's the scope of what we're doing. Here's our strategy, our story, our structure, and you will have agency to figure out how you want to lead your event in your community. And like you can work with your people to make it yours. That's exciting, that develops leadership, and it's can be easier said than done because it requires us distributing some of our power, distributing some of our resources, distributing who can make the decisions, letting go of control a little bit, which can be scary. So those are the three takeaways that I would like to share with you. If you all want to share, I see some folks are already now. I'd love to hear if you have any takeaway in the chat that you would like to bring to your team from this presentation. So just in the chat, share any takeaways you have. And I'll put my email. Well, I'll put it on this slide so you all can see it and it doesn't get lost in the chat. There you go. Awesome. So I see Carol in the chat. I feel like it could be a game changer. Amazing. A franchise business. Love it. Awesome. All right, team. Well, feel free to keep sharing takeaways with me, whether in the chat or over email. I had a great time with you all today. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope we connect soon in the future.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. And we will do a follow-up with everyone. And I will be in your inbox on Monday to follow up with you too. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.